Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What was the scariest non-paranormal thing to ever happen to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Came home around 11 p.m. after hanging out with my friends. I was halfway through changing into my PJs when I heard a light tapping noise on my window pane. My house is a one-story, and my room has one big window facing into the street. I didn't really think much of it because my house is old and makes weird noises sometimes. All of a sudden, I hear some man yelling incoherently outside my house and my dad chiming in a few minutes later. All I was thinking was, who the hell is this trying to fight my dad at 11 p.m.? The fuck? Turns out, some man was actually peering into my window watching me change, and the man yelling was one of my neighbors driving by and trying to confront the peeping Tom. My dad came out to yell at this creepy a-hole, but he ran off and got away. The cops eventually came and chilled outside my house for a while to reassure me. I bought some thick-ass curtains to cover my windows, but I still feel like someone's watching me. This was 17 years ago, give or take, and my family and I went camping at a national forest not far from us. It was a campsite area with other people also camping, but far enough apart to have a bit of seclusion. We did this once a year or so and would stay for 4 days and 3 nights. One night, we decided to go to the top of the mountain and go to the lookout. This was against the park rules, no access to the top after nightfall, but we went anyway. I remember clear as day when we reached the top. The headlights of our van panned from left to right as we turned into the parking area at the lookout. We see a beat-up old pickup truck, rusted and overall kind of creepy looking. The headlights keep going, and we see a man pushing a lumpy, rolled-up carpet off the side of the mountain. He quickly turned to face us, and I remember seeing his eyes reflect off the headlights. They were the scariest eyes I've ever seen. My dad whipped the van around and drove back down the mountain as fast as he could, while still being safe. My parents stayed awake the whole night, and they said they saw the truck drive past our campsite multiple times but never stopped. In the morning, we packed up everything and went home. That was the last time we went camping. Perhaps he's a landscaper or a contractor doing some late-night illegal dumping. Or he's a murderer.
So when I was little, about 9 or 10, my brother and his friends, plus me, went to a restaurant. We all decided to play tag outside the restaurant. This was after dinner, so it was sort of dark outside. I was running laps around the restaurant. There was this car parked in front of the restaurant with a guy sitting inside it, about mid-30s, I guess. I didn't think much of it and kept running. I'd run another lap and he's getting out of the car. Another one and he's right in front of me. I turn to get out of the way, but he jumps in front of me and yells, "Gotcha!" He misses and I run away from him laughing. I go inside and go to the bathroom, but when I come out, he's not there anymore. I never knew where he went. I grew up in a little village in the middle of nowhere surrounded by fields. I would often walk my huge wolfhound pretty late at night. That way I avoided the dog owners who were scared of my pup. So one evening I was walking up the hill to the church with my friend and my dog. All was well. We had a torch with us. It was a late summer evening and chatting away as usual. Going around the corner towards the top of the hill, I shone the light ahead to see if there were any foxes or such. The light reflected off of a van, which was completely invisible before. It was half in the bushes with no lights on. We paused for a second, turning the torch off. Then the van turned on, hearing a strange splutter, and the headlights came on, pointing down the hill toward us. We panicked and started to run down the hill, unable to get to the fields on either side by the hedges. The van started to play music, typical charts stuff, really loud, driving directly toward us, getting faster. We ducked into a hedge, lay on the floor, and waited. My dog was going crazy, growling and snarling. Wolfhounds are incredibly sweet, and I've never seen him act that way before or since. We waited an hour in the mud. I called my dad to come meet us, and he heard the van driving past us again and again, just going around in circles. I've never been so relieved to have my dog and my dad walk me home. Okay, so here's a quick story. Even though I'm already too late in this thread for it to matter, it matters. When I was in my sophomore year of high school, I used to sleep over at my buddy's house all the time. He had a nice regular room. The only oddity was that it was disconnected from the house. It was in the corner of their backyard. In his room was one of those glass squares in the ceiling. I'm blanking on what they're called, which is essentially a sunroof for a house. For some reason,
His sunroof was fairly opaque and foggy, so you couldn't really see through it. We were having a gaming marathon, but only for one app on our phone, where you were a bird basically jumping off walls, avoiding spikes, and collecting candy. About 2 hours in, I look up at the sunroof, and what I saw, I'll never be able to forget. It was a little man, just a tiny man, in a plain white t-shirt. A full-grown man with irregular body proportions and a regular-looking face scaled down to about half a foot, army crawling atop the sunroof. I have never been as scared as when I saw this little man. I didn't know what to do or say. I was just looking at this Toy Story-esque tiny little unexplainable man crawling on top of the ceiling, and he did it so fluidly, just human-like. It was the only point in my life I remember being truly in a state of shock. After what felt like a century, I looked at my friend in horror to explain to him what I was seeing, and this idiot is literally crawling around his bed in a rectangular pattern for no effing reason, since who knows? Literally crawling back and forth around the corners of his bed on his elbows and knees for no effing reason at like 3 a.m. I checked for the little man again, and he's doing the same. I check my friend again, still crawling, same clothes, same crawl, same lack of reasoning, and I realize what's happening. The sunroof was reflecting my effing idiot friend being an effing idiot at 3 in the effing idiot morning. All in all, it's not so eventful a story. I'll just never ever forget the 15 or so seconds I was watching the unexplainable, maybe alien crawling on the roof of my buddy's home in the nothing hours of the morning. I don't think I'll ever experience that feeling again. Such confusion and fear and curiosity and everything all at once. I didn't have an idea what was happening. Anyway, all my friends call that the little man story, and it's become a bit of an urban legend in my little group. I went to the beach with a group of friends one Sunday, and then decided to go take a quick smoking break at a small shack a few meters away from the group. Whilst there, a man who seemed nice enough struck up a conversation. He then went on to detail a murder he'd gotten away with due to the fact that it was ultimately classified as manslaughter. He served about 5 years and was back on the streets. Scariest thing about it was he was comfortable with revealing this to a complete stranger. And he wasn't even bragging or anything, just stating matter-of-factly. Flipped a boat once, went underwater, instant panic, shit's effed up. You're underneath the boat, this is bad, you're gonna drown. No you're not, stop, stay calm. Find which way is up, look at the bubbles, go up, surface, breathe. Hold onto the upside down boat, check for your friends, everybody's okay. I think we just lost the engine. Who gives an F? Everybody's okay. Here comes help. Man, we're kind of embarrassed. We're alive. Flip the boat though. One night as I was driving home from work, I ended up at a stoplight on a fairly deserted street. While I was sitting at the light, I saw a man walking slowly down the road towards my car. I became very nervous when I realized he was staring at me and started running towards my car. I looked up at the light and saw that it was still red, which caused me to lock the car doors instinctively. When I looked back, the man was standing right next to my car and violently tried to open my passenger side door several times. Luckily, the light turned green in that second and I sped off. The dead look he had in his eyes still freaks me out. When I was in 6th grade, so probably about 10 or 11, I went to play an indoor soccer game. I was playing in a league against 14 or 15-year-old kids, so they were considerably larger than me. Anyway, we were playing the game, nothing out of the ordinary, when the next thing I know, I'm waking up on the floor surrounded by EMTs and parents. I was freezing cold and I could not feel my legs. Everyone was standing around me, crying and in shock, and I was very confused. What had happened was that this kid who was playing goalie ran all the way up to the halfway line where I had received a pass. He proceeded to pick me up and powerbomb me onto the floor, which was essentially concrete with a layer of carpet over it. I landed on my head, was knocked out cold, had a severe concussion, and started having full-body seizures, think possessed by the devil. Apparently, the guy just stood over me, laughing like a maniac. I think he might have been a little unhinged, because as far as I can remember, our team hadn't done anything to warrant such an action. I was out cold for about 2 minutes, and woke up in the cold, paralyzed, confused state. I think I was in shock. An ambulance took me to the hospital, had me stripped down and prepared for a CAT scan, and all I could think is, damn it, why did I have to wear teal-colored briefs today? They did the scan and thankfully found no brain damage. It did kind of change the way I played soccer though, leading to an overcautious approach which led to people thinking I was a bit of a pussycat in terms of style of play. Also, sometimes when I'm walking around, I get this intangible fear that someone is going to attack me from behind or that people will just attack me for no reason whatsoever. I guess it's just heightened alertness now.
That hyper alertness and those fears are completely warranted. That's just absolutely terrible. I hope you're doing better.
Had a heart attack last year. I'm 43, so it wasn't something that was on my radar. Started off feeling like heartburn that wouldn't go away. I decided to go to bed. Bad call. Lots of people die that way. Within minutes I couldn't breathe, was freezing cold and pouring buckets of sweat, and felt incredibly dizzy even though I was lying down. My wife came in, took one look at me and called 911. The scariest part was the ambulance ride. I was in so much pain and couldn't catch my breath at all. Didn't think I was going to make it. Ended up having a 100% blockage of my right coronary artery. The cardiologist told me if the EMTs had taken another 5 minutes to get me, I'd be dead. There have been a few things that have scared me that were not paranormal, but by far, one of the scariest was when some of my friends went to a local school at night, and of course, it was creepy as F, but we noticed in the back field, someone seemed to be crouching down. One of my friends shined their phone flashlight towards them, and they stood up. The guy stared at us for a full minute before charging towards us at breakneck speed. We all sprinted out of there as fast as effing possible. Having to evacuate a plane on the runway because of a fuel leak. I had a seat near the wing, and from my window I could clearly see the jet fuel gushing out onto the runway. It wasn't long before fire trucks sped in and started diluting it with water, but man, the feeling was terrifying for a while, especially since I was just a little kid and the plane blowing up seemed like a plausible scenario to my young mind. The mad scramble of people to get themselves and their stuff out of the plane was worse than the leak itself. Sao Paulo, Brazil, a few months ago, was on my car waiting for a semaphore to go green. There was a Chevrolet Corsa right in front of me, 4 guys in there. Suddenly, 2 motorcycles stopped on each side of the Chevrolet, 2 guys on each bike. Suddenly, the guys on the bikes were shooting on the car. The guys in the car start shooting back. One man leaves the car on my right and starts shooting at the guys on the bikes. It happened so damn quick, so many shots. The guys on the bikes were on the ground quickly. 2 dead in the Corsa, 3 of the guys on the bikes were not moving, and the 4th was moaning, holding his belly. Then, the guy that left the car on my side started screaming that he was a cop. The next day, I saw on the TV that the guys on the bikes tried to rob a car that had cops, and the cops killed them, but I saw it. It was not that. Clearly, the guys came to simply kill the cops in the first car, and they were expecting it. That's why they had another guy waiting in the car in the back. It looked more like 2 gangs fighting. I've seen my fair share of dead bodies, and I hear gunshots at least once a week, but to see it that close, damn, really made me realize how easy it is to die. Those guys were gone so quickly, and also, it's funny how different it is from games.
You could play video games your whole entire life and watch any clips on the internet you could. There's nothing like seeing that in real life.
When I was a kid, we would visit my grandmother in Mexico every weekend. We would get there Friday and usually come back Sunday late that day. She had a ranch that was surrounded by forest that was a few miles from the Rio Grande. It was not that big of a place, and there were brickworks, I think that's what they're called, at each end of the place where we had people drop by and make bricks that they would later go and sell in town. The ranch did not have running water or electricity except for a generator that would sometimes get turned on. My grandmother would sometimes want it on if it got too late and she was going to miss her Mexican soaps on TV. One night, during a full moon, if I recall correctly, I was coming back from the brickyard by myself. It was not that far of a walk, but you still had to go through the woods. I could see pretty clearly in the dark, and I was almost to the gate to get back when I just had this chill down my spine. So I turned around and see a pair of eyes, and I just freeze. I couldn't tell what it was right away, but it looked low to the ground. I then realized that it was human eyes. I eventually made out that it was a man, and he was kneeling on the ground. He was looking in my direction, not at me, but through me. Then, suddenly I noticed more eyes and saw movement. It was about 3 guys. Then, as I look around better, it ended up being around 10 guys, all armed. They slowly and silently started walking towards the ranch. I ran back in and went right to my grandmother and told her what I saw. She looked at them coming towards the ranch and just kind of chuckled. "Oh, they're just soldiers, probably night training. Just leave them alone, they will probably leave soon." They went through the ranch not saying anything, not making a noise, and just ended up at the other end of the ranch and just ended up in the forest again. I had been playing at the brickwork for hours, and not once did I notice them walk by me before. Not sure how long they had been in the forest. This unfortunately happened just a couple of weeks ago. I woke up at 6 in the morning to go to work and went to the bathroom to start getting ready when I found my husband in there naked and walking around aimlessly. He was grabbing at random things with his right arm, and when I got in there, he started grabbing at me and pulling my hair. I started freaking out and yelling his name and trying to get him to come to by touching him on the chest. Nothing. The dead look in his eyes while he looked through me chilled me to the bone. I ended up having to call 911 to get an ambulance to my house. Unfortunately, my internal filter was lost during my conversation with the dispatcher. I let it slip that he grabbed me and pulled my hair. Therefore, the first responders were cops, who probably thought this was a domestic disturbance. In fact, 5 different cop cars pulled up to my house. They burst in my house and immediately threw me out so they could restrain my husband. Of course, with all the recent cop shootings, I was scared to death that they were going to shoot my husband. A police officer I had actually met before was asking me about the situation and asked me if anyone else was in the house. I told him my 2-year-old daughter was upstairs in her room, and that set things off even more. Finally, they let me back into the house once they felt they had properly restrained him. The EMTs were allowed in as well. He was naked on the bed with his hands handcuffed behind his back. Very disconcerting. The cops asked me to find him something to wear. Was only able to find boxers before they took him away on a chair gurney. Fast forward, I get to the ER and they've done some preliminary tests on him and they think it's bacterial meningitis. Within a few hours, they had him moved into the ICU, put him into a medically induced coma, and had put a breathing tube down his throat. Later that week, when they performed a follow-up spinal tap, they determined it might be best to drill a hole in my husband's head to monitor and relieve pressure. That same day, I was informed that he woke up out of his sedation and was able to follow simple commands. That day was an emotional roller coaster, for sure. He's now at home, resting. He's much weaker as his muscles have atrophied from a week in bed, but he's made a full recovery otherwise, thank God. But this is one of the scariest things I've ever had to deal with, as I thought my husband was going to die for several days, and then I thought he'd have to have brain surgery. I drove my car off a cliff with my then girlfriend inside. I was young and grossly overestimated my ability to drive. It was wet and I had a rear-wheel drive car. It was a mountain road and there was no cell reception. We were lucky enough to somehow climb the embankment and flag down a car and hitch a ride into town to call 911. I always thought a near-death accident would feel like a dream, like I would see my life pass before my eyes. Instead, I was hyper-aware of what was going on around me, which made it all the more sickening.